Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a deep dive into something really quite devastating. The recent Air India Boeing 787 crash in Ahmedabad, India. Specifically, Flight AI171. We've pulled together information from, well, quite a few sources: Reuters, The Washington Post, NDTV, others too, trying to really unpack what happened. And also, what the investigation is starting to show, and maybe some surprising angles that are being looked at. Our goal here is to cut through the noise, give you the key nuggets, help you understand this awful tragedy and, well, what it might mean more broadly.
Exactly. This isn't just reading the headlines. We're aiming to connect some dots, look at the nuances, and highlight what's really significant here, especially, as the investigation keeps going.
Okay, let's get right into it then. Flight AI171. What do we know about the actual event, those immediate moments?
Right. So the date was June 12th, 2025. The flight, as you said, AI171, an Air India Boeing 787-Dreamliner, registration VT-ANB. It departed from Ahmedabad, India. The destination was London Gatwick.
And the crash itself, it happened incredibly quickly, didn't it?
Shockingly fast. Just moments after takeoff. We're talking maybe 30 seconds into the flight. Around 1:38 p.m. local time, Indian Standard Time, the aircraft just lost altitude and tragically crashed straight into a hostile building at the BJ Medical College. And then there was a fire.
You mentioned it lost altitude just moments after takeoff. For people listening, can you maybe explain why that specific phase right after leaving the ground is so critical? What does losing altitude then typically signify?
Yeah, that initial climb is, well, it's one of the most vulnerable parts of any flight. You have lower speed, low altitude. The engines are working hard. So for a modern jet like a Dreamliner to suddenly lose altitude then, it strongly suggests something catastrophic happened very suddenly. There's almost no time or height to recover from a major issue at that point. It's why those first seconds, that first minute, are always scrutinized so closely after an accident.
And the human cost here is it's immense. On the plane itself, there were 242 people. That's 230 passengers, 12 crew members.
Yeah, and the fatalities were staggering. 241 of those on board died. And tragically, another 19 people on the ground were killed when the plane hit the hostel. So that brings the total confirmed deaths to 260. And reports also say over 60 people on the ground were injured.
It's just horrific. It's being called one of the worst air disasters in India in recent years.
Definitely. And the impact, it goes deep into the communities, families, medical students at the college. There was even a report about a UK-based Gujarati couple on board expecting their first child. Just heartbreaking stories.
And amidst all that devastation, almost miraculously, there was a single survivor from the plane.
That's right. One passenger, a British Indian man named Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He apparently managed to escape through an emergency exit. His brother, sadly, was also on the flight and didn't make it. It's hard to fathom being the only one.
Absolutely. So this obviously raises the huge question: how did this happen? What are the authorities actually doing to find answers?
Well, the immediate priority is always the black boxes: the flight data recorder, the FDR, and the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR. They were recovered relatively quickly, thankfully. The FDR on June 13th, the CVR a few days later on June 16th. That's crucial.
And they've managed to get the data off them.
Yes, that's the good news. India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, they're the main body there for this sort of thing. They successfully retrieved the data from the Ford recorder that was confirmed on June 26th. They had some help from the U.S. NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board. It's quite common for the NTSB to assist internationally, given their experience.
Okay, so they have the data. What's the timeline look like for us actually hearing something?
Well, the initial word is that we might get some preliminary findings from that black box data quite soon, possibly within the next 30 days or so.
That seems quick.
It is. For preliminary findings, it won't be the full picture, of course. The Civil Aviation Ministry is talking about a more detailed interim report within about 3 months. And then the full final report. That takes time. Following international standards, the ICAO norms, those are set by the International Civil Aviation Organization to ensure investigations are consistent globally. That final report could take up to a year. It's a meticulous process.
Okay, so the investigation is underway. Now, usually in these situations, you immediately think technical failure, maybe pilot error, but you mentioned some surprising angles earlier. What makes this case potentially different?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Authorities are, of course, looking at all the standard possibilities. Technical issues, maybe a dual engine failure, problems with flaps or landing gear configuration, contaminated fuel, human error. All that is being examined.
Right, the usual checklist.
Exactly. But the Civil Aviation Minister, Muralidhar Mohol, specifically mentioned something striking: a dual-engine shutdown.
Both engines failing at the same time?
Yes. And on a modern twin jet, like the 787, that is extremely, extremely rare. Engines are designed to be independent. For both to fail simultaneously, especially right after takeoff, well, that points towards something unusual, maybe a common cause like fuel starvation or contamination, or maybe something else entirely.
And that something else is where it gets even more unusual, because sabotage hasn't been ruled out. That seems quite extraordinary for a civilian air crash investigation these days.
It is extraordinary. It's probably the most surprising element reported so far. The fact that sabotage remains, as they say, a live angle in the investigation is significant.
Why significant? I mean, how do they even investigate that alongside technical failures?
Well, it fundamentally changes the scope. Normally, air crash investigations focus heavily on the mechanics, the operations, the weather, human factors within the cockpit. But if sabotage is a real possibility, you're bringing in a whole different dimension. You're looking at security, intelligence gathering, background checks, potential motives. It requires a different skill set, often involving security agencies alongside the air accident investigators. It's rare because, frankly, proving sabotage in such a context is incredibly difficult, and most accidents do turn out to have technical or operational causes. But keeping it on the table means they're not dismissing any possibility at this stage.
So beyond the crash investigation itself, has this prompted a wider reaction in India's aviation system?
Oh, absolutely. You'd expect that after such a major incident. India's aviation regulator, the Director General of Civil Aviation, or DGCA, they acted pretty swiftly. They ordered inspections of all the other Boeing 787 Dreamliners operating in India. There are 33 of them.
And did they find anything?
So far, reports say no systemic issues have been found across the fleet. That's important information, suggesting it might not be a fleet-wide design or manufacturing flaw, at least based on initial checks. The DGCA also did a wider audit, looking at safety measures on runways, air traffic control procedures, ramp safety, not just in Ahmedabad, but at other airports like Kolkata too. It shows they're looking broadly at the system's health.
And going back to the human element, which is just so central here, any updates on identifying the victims? That must be an incredibly difficult process.
Yes, and it sounds like they've made significant progress there, which is frankly remarkable given the scale and nature of the crash. Reports indicate that authorities have now completed the identification of all 260 victims. They use DNA analysis and facial recognition technology, and crucially, the remains have been handed over to the families. That step, providing closure, is just so vital amidst the grief. A huge undertaking, handled with considerable effort, it seems.
It really is. So let's try and pull this together for everyone listening. What does this all mean? We've looked at the tragic facts of the AI171 crash, this meticulous investigation that's now underway, and these really crucial, so maybe unusual possibilities being considered, particularly that sabotage angle hasn't been dismissed.
Exactly. And that specific point, the fact that sabotage is still being actively considered, I think it really underscores how complex these investigations are now. It forces us and investigators to think beyond just, did a part fail or did the crew make a mistake? It brings in potential external threats, which isn't the usual focus in typical crash reporting.
So the world is definitely watching as that black box analysis continues. We're expecting those preliminary findings maybe in the next few weeks. Answers are desperately needed. And that leaves us with a final thought for you. Regardless of what the investigation ultimately finds in this specific tragic case, what broader implications could the mere fact that sabotage is being seriously investigated have for global aviation security protocols going forward? It really makes you think about all the layers of security needed, doesn't it, to try and keep our skies